happen. And last week we got into chapter 29 where Jacob goes to his uncle Laban's. He finds Rachel, goes back to Laban's house. He falls madly in love with Rachel. He agrees to work for 7 years in exchange for Rachel's hand in marriage. And that's kind of where we left off at the end of verse 20. We'll read verse 20 and then jump into the new text. It says, "And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her. And Jacob said unto Laban, Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go in unto her. And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. And it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah his daughter and brought her to him. And he went in unto her, and Laban gave unto his daughter Leah, Zilpah, his maid, for a handmaid." So we look at this and we go, how in the world could something like this happen? Jacob thinks he's marrying Rachel, and he goes in and they sleep together and wakes up the next morning to discover it's not Rachel, it's Leah that he's now married to. And again, marriage customs were very different in those days than they are now. They were even fairly different than they were in the New Testament times. And so they did things a lot differently. For one, it was traditional for the bride to wear the veil, until the wedding had been consummated, not the kiss the bride kind of a thing or anything like that. But when the marriage had been consummated, that's when veil was removed. They didn't have a big ceremony like we do. That's just not how they did it. The significance was not found in the ceremony itself. It was found in the marriage itself. And so it's not like they stood there at an altar and Rachel was in a dress and he was all excited about marrying her, and then they went off into the tent for their honeymoon, and Dad pulled the bait and switch on him, and he just woke up to the wrong girl next to him. It's not how it worked. Basically, marriage was a contract, and Jacob fulfilled his end of the contract. Laban fulfilled his end he was supposed to fulfill his end by giving Jacob Rachel. But the custom in those days was for the oldest daughter to marry first, and so Laban he's really deceiving the deceiver here. Jacob thought he was a pretty good deceiver. And then he ran into his uncle Laban, who was a little bit better than him. But Jacob will get his revenge on him later. So, Dad sends Leah, disguised in the veil, into the tent. Jacob goes in thinking he's going to have Rachel. They're not turning on any lights. And she's going to wear the veil until the marriage is consummated. So that's how this happens. That's how this comes about, and it's not as far-fetched if you know a little bit more about the customs of the time. It's plausible. Still, Jacob really got the same deception that his dad got. Oh yeah, I'm Esau. And I don't know if Leah ever said, "Oh, yes, I'm Rachel," trying to imitate her sister's voice. I don't know if that happened or not, but you reap what you sow. And Jacob, his crop came home 7 years after. Remember, Jacob's 84 years old at this point. We think of him as being, in his 30s. I asked y'all when we talked about Jacob stealing the blessing, how old do you picture him as? Most people pictured him in his 20s or 30s. And you were shocked when I said he was 77 when this happened. I mean, when you do the math on the whole thing, look at everything the Bible spells out. He's 77 years old, and he's pulling this adolescent trick, Now he's 84. He's worked for 7 years for his wife. He's 84. And, of course, they lived a lot longer. Jacob lived to be 147 years old. So he's in midlife at this point. He's not... don't think of him at 84 as being what you would picture an 84-year-old being today. 84 was that period's probably 45 or 50. He was probably still a very strong man in his prime at that age. So just keep all that in mind as you're forming these mental pictures of how these things go, that most of our mental pictures aren't right. And the more you dig into some of this stuff, maybe sometime we'll do some Bible genealogy, not genealogy, but Bible timeline, and we'll show you how to ferret some of this stuff out, and you can develop your own. Or I'll sell you my copy. I put too much time into it, give it away now. It's been a project for about 10 years I've been working on pulling some of this stuff out and researching some of this stuff. So it's been fun, but it's a lot of work. And so, Jacob gets up in the morning, verse 25, and it came to pass that in the morning, behold, it was Leah. So the sun comes up, and he can see, and Rachel was really good looking, and Leah was not. So he immediately knew the difference. Even without their makeup on and all that, he knew the difference. What is this that thou hast done unto me? Did not I serve with thee for Rachel? Wherefore then hast thou beguiled me? Laban said, it must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fulfill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve me yet 7 other years. So Jacob doesn't wait another 7 years. I think somebody asked this question last week. Jacob doesn't serve for Rachel 7 years, get tricked, and then serve another 7 years before he marries her. He gets tricked into marrying Leah. When the honeymoon is over, he's allowed to marry Rachel, and then he worked 7 years on the back end, now with 2 wives in rapid succession. So he went from 84 years as a bachelor to having 2 wives. And that goes about as well as you think it will. So verse 28, Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah, his handmaid, to be her maid. So Leah has Zilpah, Rachel has Bilhah. Those are the 2 handmaids. So each wife has a maid to tend to her and wait on her. Verse 30, and he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years. You're going to see that Jacob kind of treats Leah like Abraham treated Hagar, like she's a secondary wife or she's a second-class wife. He loves Rachel. He worked for 7 years for Rachel. He'll work another 7 years for her. But when he takes Rachel to be his wife, he had worked for 7 years. Rachel was all he wanted. He got stuck with Leah. And so, he's got these 2 wives, and he's going to treat Leah like she's not as important to him, because she's not as important to him. And that's going to sow the seeds for family strife. That's going to sow discord between Rachel and Leah, who are sisters, by the way. So there's already probably a little bit of competitiveness between siblings. But then at the same time, now you've got these 2 women who are sisters competing for the affection of Jacob, and Leah's never going to be able to attain that. And so God balances the scales. God doesn't let Jacob get away with treating Leah like a second-class wife and treating her as if she's less important. So God is going to make Leah more important and balance that importance level out in the eyes of Jacob, as we will see here going forward. Verse 31 says, and when the Lord saw that Leah was hated, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. And Leah conceived and bare a son, and she called his name Reuben. For she said, surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction. Now therefore my husband will love me. The shadow of the microphone was right across that word. My eyes aren't as good as they used to be. And so because Leah is not treated right, God uses childbearing. He blesses Leah, makes her very fruitful in that regard, and he withholds children from Rachel. And it will create another source of strife. At the time, it kind of creates a balance where Rachel used to be able to say, early on, she used to be able to say, well, he loves me more. But then God blesses Leah with children, and she's able to say, yeah, but I got kids and you don't. And so it kind of created a mutually assured destruction kind of a scenario where they both had something over the other. And it brought maybe a little bit of balance, though it didn't take away the enmity between these sisters and the family feud that is brewing inside this family. So Leah has her first son named Reuben, and Reuben literally means "see a son." And she says, "Surely the Lord hath looked upon my affliction." This is why she named him Reuben, because the Lord looked upon her affliction, and she thought now her husband would love her. This is a mistake a lot of women make. Their marriage lacks something, and they think that children will be the answer. Children will never be the answer to marital problems. Children only magnify every problem. Like marriage, if you've got two people that got problems and they get married, marriage magnifies those problems. It does not diminish them, it magnifies them. And if you go into marriage with full suitcases, those suitcases are going to get opened up and dumped all over the bedroom. And somebody's going to have to deal with it and deal with it quick. Children do the same thing. Husband and wife are struggling. The worst thing in the world you can do is add children to the mix. You should fix the marital discord, and then you should have children. Because children are going to magnify division between husband and wife. Jacob doesn't love Leah anymore when she has a son. And Jacob's firstborn son at that. Reuben is the firstborn. He's the eldest. He's supposed to be the one to rule and take over as head of the clan when Jacob dies now. Leah thinks she is surpassed Rachel, and that Jacob's affection is going to be turned to her because she's the mother of the heir. She's the mother of the firstborn. She's sadly mistaken. Okay, that doesn't happen. But she keeps hoping. She keeps hoping and hope. So verse 33 says, "And she conceived again and bare a son, and said, Because the Lord hath heard that I was hated, he hath therefore given me this son also. And she called his name Simeon," which the name Simeon simply means hearing. So she has Reuben, see a son? God's heard my affliction, and now my husband's going to love me because of this son. Well, that didn't work out. So then she says, well, God heard me because my husband still hates me, and so he gave me another son. She names him Simeon, which literally means hearing. She, verse 34, conceived again and bare a son and said, now this time, see, when the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Okay? Now this time will my husband be joined unto me, because I have borne him 3 sons. Therefore was his name called Levi, which means joined. Okay, it's the idea of bonding two things together. In wood shop, when we would laminate 2 boards together, I would tell them that, if you use the proper glue and you do it correctly, and then later on you try to break that board, it'll break anywhere but at the glue joint. The glue joint will be stronger than the grain of the wood. They're bonded together. That's what the word Levi means. The name Levi means, and that's what Leah thinks this time he's going to love me more. It doesn't work. Verse 35, and she conceived again. This is her 4th son, and bare a son. And she said, now will I praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah and left bearing. And name Judah just means praise. So she has first 4 sons. Now she on the 4th son, she doesn't say, oh, now my husband's really going to love me. Now she just praises God because she's had 4 sons. She's demonstrated her value as a woman in childbearing to her husband, and that these children probably came in rapid succession. So they probably were born, a little more than a year apart. That would be my guess. She had the first son, and then within a few months, she would have become pregnant again, and then after having the second one. So my guess would be in the span of 4 to 5 years, she has 4 children. These happen very quickly, and then now she's not having children for a little while. Okay, so Rachel doesn't want to be outdone here. She knows she's the favorite. She just can't have children, and that really irks her because, again, in those days, for a wife not to bear children, especially sons, to her husband, the thought process was that God was somehow displeased with them, or they were being punished for something, or they were defective in some way. Okay, now we know a woman's value is not in childbearing, but when men in those days went out and they worked, and they worked very hard manual labor in order to produce food for the family, the one thing that the wife could do for her husband to share in that struggle for survival was to bear children. Okay, so we have a little bit different notion or sensibility about childbearing versus being infertile than they do. But sometimes in Scripture, God had closed the womb of women. He prevented them from having children. Other times, it looks like they were just naturally infertile, and that God interceded to give them children at a different time. So does God interfere, or intercede is the correct word? Does God intercede in childbearing to either close or open wombs? Yes, he does. There's a biblical precedent of that. Does a woman's ability or inability to have children demonstrate God's favor or disfavor with that woman? And the answer is no. So both can be true at the same time. So lest we think that the Bible is promoting that all women are good for is bearing children, that's not the case at all. But in those days, the one way that a woman could make as significant a contribution to the home as her husband, who had to dig wells and chop trees down with an axe, and everything was by the sweat of his brow to bring home the food that they would need. He'd hunt animals for food and plant. Survival was difficult in those days, and so for the wife to contribute on an equal plane to her husband, childbearing was the equivalent of the struggle that he did. She struggled. Childbearing is not easy for the woman. Providing for the home is not easy for the man. Those were the curses that God put on the husband, the man, and the woman in the garden. From the sweat of your brow, you're going to work to have your bread until you die. That was his curse. Her curse was sorrow in conception. And so you put those together, and she got to share in the struggle for survival through childbearing. Okay? Does that make sense? All right. That was the mindset, and then some in those days. So here comes Rachel. She's studied the family history well. She's got a plan. So verse 1 of chapter 31, Rachel saw that she bare Jacob no children. Rachel envied her sister and said unto Jacob, give me children, or else I die. Okay, now my guess is that Jacob was probably intimate with Rachel more often than Leah. Leah seemed to get pregnant like every time. Give me children or I die. Now, how was he supposed to do that? We presume he was doing the only thing that he possibly could in order to give her children. It just wasn't working out. And so he gets mad. This is not my fault. Okay? And Jacob's anger was kindled against Rachel. And he said, am I in God's stead? Who hath withheld thee the fruit of the womb? What he said was, I'm not the infertile one here. My other wife's having kids all the time. I'm not the infertile one. Remember, the same thing happened after Sarah gave Hagar to Abraham. She conceived pretty quick, and it became clear Abraham was not the infertile one, which only made it worse. It only made it worse. It was like, oh, this was a mistake. And so Jacob gets mad, and he says, what do you want me to do? Am I God? I can't do anything about it. I'm not the one withholding children from you. God is. So go talk to him. Okay? He's not at all happy about this burden being placed on him. Okay? Especially from the wife he likes better. And that's just the truth of it. He likes her better than Leah. I'm sure Jacob would have loved for Rachel to bear the firstborn, since she was the favored wife. But it didn't work out. She was barren. So verse 3, and she said, behold, my maid Bilhah. Remember, your grandma pulled this trick with Grandpa. Behold, my maid Bilhah, go in unto her, and she shall bear upon my knees, that I may also have children by her. So it says, you take my handmaid Bilhah, you make her a wife, and then you go bear children, and she'll bear children in my name, and they'll be credited to my account. So you have children with her, I get the credit, okay? That was the mindset there. Sarah had the same mindset. That was, again, is this a practice God blesses or has put his stamp of approval on? The answer is definitely no. Okay, God does not come right out and condemn this course of action, but the results of doing this are disastrous every time. So you ought to be able to figure it out. God shouldn't have to say, no, don't do this, because he's already said one man, one woman, one lifetime, and then he said, be fruitful and multiply, and he didn't say anything about taking, servant girls and getting them pregnant. Not in there. So, was that common practice in the day, though? Yes. Does that make it God-honoring? No. Was it common? Yes. That's why they did it. They did it because it was part of the culture. Doesn't make it right. Slavery's been a part of the culture. Cultures throughout human history. Some have been practiced, and the Bible gives us gives Israel instructions on their practice of slavery. By the way, if we practice slavery in America the way the Bible says, slaves would have been treated a whole lot better than they ever were in the colonies. But is slavery taking somebody against their will and making them a slave, is that approved by God? The answer is no. Did it happen? Yes. Is it recognized as something that went on? Yes. Did God want Adam and Eve to sin in the garden? No. Did they? Yes. Did God deal with it according to what the reality was on the ground? Yes. So, when people say, oh, the Bible's like an instruction manual on how to have slaves. No, God provided governance for the nation of Israel when they practiced slavery, and slavery in Israel was usually, almost exclusively, practiced as indentured servitude. So if you had a debt and you couldn't pay it, you sold yourself into servitude for a period of time, and at the end of that period of time, you went free. That's how slavery was practiced. Most of the other time, it was they attacked us, we attacked them back, and so we took a bunch of their people as slaves in compensation for them attacking us and killing our people and stealing our stuff. And that's how it was practiced. Okay? Should we be doing that kind of thing today? No. Did they do it then? Yes. And then God said, all right, well, if you're going to do this, let me set some rules up for this. Okay? That doesn't mean God says, hey, slavery's good. All right? There's a difference, and I grow weary of mental midgets who can't make the distinction between God recognizing something that's happening and recording it and talking about it in the Bible, and God saying, hey, we should all get handmaids. I'm going to go out and get my wife a handmaid just so I can marry her and have more children. It's not God's stamp of approval. It's just recognizing what is happening. This is a historical account. It's not an instruction manual. You got to know the difference. So, verse 4, she gave him Bilhah, her handmaid, to wife, and Jacob went into her. So now he's got 3 wives. He's got 4 sons, but he's got 3 wives now. When you've got 4 sons and your wives are close behind in number, like your wives could outnumber your kids at any moment, you're doing something wrong. And of course, and Bilhah conceived and bare Jacob a son. Jacob apparently is very fertile. It's Rachel that's the problem. And Rachel said, God hath judged me. Here's her handmaid. This is her plan. Her handmaid gets pregnant. gives birth, and what does she say? She doesn't say, praise the Lord. She says, God has judged me. Things we think will make us happy. God hath judged me, and hath also heard my voice, and hath given me a son, therefore called she his name Dan. Oh, God's judged me, but he's heard my voice. He's given me a son by her, and so she calls him Dan, which literally means judge. So now, as far as Rachel's concerned, it's 4-1. She's trailing 4-1 in the child game. Okay, we're going into the top of the 6th inning, trailing 4-1. Time for her to step up to the plate and get some runs back. Verse 7, and Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again and bare Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, with great wrestlings have I wrestled with my sister, and I have prevailed. And she called his name Naphtali, which just means wrestling. Okay, if you're naming your kids based on the sibling rivalry you have with your sister, who's married to the same guy you are, you're going to have screwed up kids. Okay? These kids are going to be really, really a mess. And when we keep studying through the book of Genesis, you'll find out they are a mess. They're going to sell their 17-year-old brother into slavery just because he's daddy's favorite and they don't like him. And some of the other things they do are just absolutely abhorrent, and why God didn't kill him is beyond me, but So now it's 4-2, and Rachel's catching up. In verse 7, and Bilhah, Rachel's maid, conceived again and bare Jacob a second son. Skip down. Verse 9, when Leah saw that she had left bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob to wife. Leah says, Rachel's catching up here, and we can't allow that, so let's go to the bullpen, call out the next one. Here's Zilpah, here's my maid. Jacob, you take her, and you raise up children for me. I want to get back on the scoreboard and extend the lead. We can't let this happen. The only buddy who's smiling at the end of the day on this is Jacob. I mean, he's got 4 women to choose from now, and his 2 wives are throwing more women at him all the time. So, I mean, why is he discouraged about any of this? And he's getting lots of kids out of it too, by the way, which is good for him and good for his future. It says in verse 10, and Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a son, and Leah said, a troop cometh, and she called his name Gad, which just means a troop. So Leah says, oh boy, we're back in it now. We're going to blow Rachel out of the water now. We got this. Here comes a troop. So named him Gad. Again, you're naming your kids because of your animosity towards your sister. Going to be problems. And Jacob doesn't seem to care. He's getting what he wants. All right, and so verse 12, and Zilpah, Leah's maid, bare Jacob a second son. Leah said, happy am I, for the daughters will call me blessed. And she called his name Asher, which means gladness. And so she figured her handmaid given her 2 more sons. Now she was up 6-2 in this thing. And she said, all the women are going to be jealous of me. 6 sons. We're 6 for 6 in the sons department. That was a big deal in those days. But these kids are growing up in a dysfunctional home, and it's going to start happening. We're going to start seeing the fallout from that here real quick. Verse 14, and Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them unto his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, give me, I pray thee, of thy son's mandrakes. And she said unto her, is it a small matter that thou hast taken my husband? And wouldest thou take away my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he shall lie with thee tonight for thy son's mandrake. So now they're pimping out their husband. So mandrake is an herb. It's got kind of a white and purple blossom on it. People in the ancient Near East thought the mandrakes stimulated sensual desire and aided in conception. So they thought that would be a help. So Reuben brings some mandrakes home. She's Leah's son. Rachel sees that. She says, give me, I want those. I need those. I need the help. Can I have those? And Leah said, you've stolen my husband, which isn't true, but, you've taken my husband. You're going to take my son's mandrakes. Okay, well, I'll let Jacob spend the night with you then. It was my night to sleep with him. You can sleep with him tonight. And then I get the mandrake. So they work that out. Sounds like a real godly family, doesn't it? This is the kind of Christian home we're all thinking we would like to have someday, right? So Jacob's got a lot of women that he's allowed to sleep with, but he is absent when it comes to raising the children, guiding the men that he's brought into the world, and quelling the animosity between the women. He's just absent. And this is going to blow up in his face and hurt him. Ultimately, Jacob will be the most hurt by his own failures as a father and a husband. Okay, so verse 16, and Jacob came out of the field in the evening, and Leah went out to meet him and said, thou must come in unto me, for surely I have hired thee with my son's mandrakes. I mean, I don't know. I come home from work, and the ugly wife meets me at the door and says, you get to sleep with me tonight. I paid for you and gave my son's mandrakes to the wife you really love, so you'll come and lie with me tonight. I mean, I'm not making this up. This is what's happening. I'm just putting it into more modern terminology. I mean, this is totally messed up. This is not a well-adjusted, healthy family going on. And Jacob is contributing to it. Verse 17, and God hearkened unto Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob the fifth son. So she gives up the mandrakes, but she gets the fifth son. And so she's going to name this son Issachar, because I have given my maiden to my husband, and she called his name Issachar, which just means he brings wages. How'd you like to grow up knowing what your name means? Verse 19, and Leah conceived again and bare Jacob the sixth son. So 6 sons by Leah, 2 by Zilpah, 2 by Bilhah. He's got 10 kids now, 10 sons now. Zebulun means dwelling, and it says in verse 20, Leah said, God hath endued me with a good dowry. Now will my husband dwell with me, because I have borne him 6 sons. She called his name Zebulun. They're still fighting over Jacob, and they're still naming their kids according to where they are at the battle between each other. Verse 21, afterwards she bare a daughter and called her name Dinah. So he's got 10 sons and a daughter now. 2 more sons are coming. Rachel will contribute 2 last-minute entries into the ball game here. It's sad that this family childbearing became such a contest, and that Jacob really didn't do anything to quell that. His inattention to it only seemed to exacerbate it. So, where are we at on time? Got a couple minutes here. Verse 22, and God remembered Rachel, and God hearkened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bare a son, and said, God hath taken away my reproach. And she called his name Joseph, and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. And it came to pass, when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go into my own place, into my country. Give me my wives and my children, for whom I have served thee, and let me go, for thou knowest my service which I have done thee. Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed thee for thy sake. And he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. And he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. For it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude. And the Lord had blessed thee since my coming, and now when shall I provide for my own house also? Jacob said, I need to start providing for my own house. God's blessed you. I've done a great job with your cattle. You're doing really well. It's time for me to start making some money here. Verse 31, and he said, what shall I give thee? And Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. And so shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats, and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. And Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. And so Jacob goes through and he takes all the speckled and spotted. Jacob really shows a knowledge of genetics. He was scientifically ahead of his time. But he had spent his whole life, he was now over 90 years old, and he'd spent his whole life working cattle. He understood how this worked. Laban had a few that they used probably for milk and for, occasionally butcher one, but Laban never really built up any flock or herd. Now all of a sudden, Jacob's been there 14 years working, and now they've got lots of cattle because Jacob understands how to breed and how genetics was working so that he could, and he's going to use that to his advantage. He's going to trick dumb old Uncle Laban out of some really prime beef coming up here. So that's what he does. And you can go down through the rest of chapter 30 and see how he put the rods of green poplar, and he put them in when certain cattle were drinking at the water wells, and then they would breed. And so he started off with all speckled and spotted, and then he began to have more appealing cattle. Laban's cattle ended up being the ones that were kind of scrawny and not the choicest. It says in verse 42, but when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. So Jacob exercised. He said, you give me these to start with. I'm going to pass through, and you give me these. The rest will be yours. You just give me these. These that you they're speckled, they're spotted, they're ring straight. They're not the best. Let me have those. And then Jacob parlays that into, he's got a really great crop of cattle, and Uncle Laban's got all the rejects at the end. And he just uses his knowledge of breeding cattle and breeding to get back at his Uncle Laban. He would work another 6 years doing this through the rest of chapter 29 and rest of chapter 30 that he's talking about there. Jacob will have been there 20 years, 7 years working. He marries Leah, then marries Rachel, works another 7 years, then says, you owe me. I'm going to leave at the end of that 14. He ends up staying, working his scheme for another 6 years. At the 20-year mark, he's ready to make his move, and he's ready to leave, and we'll see that coming up. But does anybody have any questions? Steve? No, not looked down upon. I mean, sons were better, but Leah had already had 6 sons. I don't have her name, meaning of her name in here. But we also don't have Leah saying, this happened, therefore I'm calling her name Dinah. So, it's kind of open to interpretation. Daughters were better than nothing, but if you had sons and then you added daughters, that was wonderful. So, and the brothers would be very protective of her. She was a valued member of the family. So, anyone else? Tracy? Yeah, this was more based on Jacob's knowledge of breeding patterns. We would call genetics today. He understood how to breed cattle and get good cattle when he did it. Sticking the rods in there, whatever effect that would have had, whether it would have stimulated the desire to mate or to breed on the part of the cattle, may or may not be scientifically sound. May have been a superstition, or he may have done it just to throw Laban off the course. Doesn't mean anything, but I'm gonna stick it in there and let Laban think I'm really doing something here. I don't know, but yeah, I've always read that as God blessed Jacob, but he blessed Jacob's knowledge of cattle. Anyone else? Okay. Well, next week we'll see the family strife, Jacob deciding to strike out on his own, how he does that. The narrative will soon shift to Joseph, and we will, life of Joseph is a lot of fun. Jacob's not exactly the upstanding example of pretty much anything, so at least not at this point in his life. We'll see the moment that all changes as well. All right, a couple announcements. The funeral for Pastor Douglas has been postponed till next weekend, so the 21st, Friday the 21st, from 5 to 8 at Newcomers Northeast Chapel there on Dublin Granville Road will be the calling hours. There'll be calling hours Saturday the 22nd here from 9 until the service starts at 10. So times haven't changed, but the date has. The funeral home couldn't accommodate the funeral this weekend, so we moved it to next weekend. But everything else is pretty much the same, so be aware of that. If you know anybody who was talking about coming, or you called anybody, please make sure that they know. And it's on our Facebook page, and I sent out an email today, and we've done everything we can to get the word out on that. So, and then looking forward to Sunday, Summer Family Open House is starting up. We've got the Johnson family coming in for that, and John and Chip are going to be doing the setup for the VBS stuff. John's told me he doesn't really need a lot of help, and he's got people, so praise the Lord for that. I'm planning on going out again at 10:30. We're going to go out till noon for about an hour and a half doing door hangers. Teenagers will be back, and then teenagers, the plan is for the teens and Brian and I, whoever else is with us, to go to lunch and then to go back out, and if we have any left, to finish those off, since they're not going to be any good to us after it's over. So we're going to try and get all of those out if we can. There's some 50 house maps, and there's some 100 house maps, again on average, back there on the table, and if you would like to grab a map, you can. I'm going to be doing some tomorrow. I don't know exactly when, but I'm going to be doing some tomorrow as my schedule allows. And so if you want to go, ladies, if you want to go, let my wife know. She'll see she can go with you, or you can grab a partner. We'll point you in the right direction. We're mainly just going right here around our neighborhood, so nothing hard or tricky about that. And then the full schedule's in there. There are a few things that we still need on the sign-up list, especially just making sure we have enough food for the cookout and be ready for that. If you have any questions, you want them to talk to you, Shannon, or you have enough on your plate? Okay. All right, you can talk to Shannon about the cookout. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday stuff, talk to my wife about as far as any of the food stuff for that. So we'll get all that straightened out. But we've got most of what we need. We just have a few more food items and things along that line. So, all right. I think that's it on the announcements. If we'll go over to our prayer list tonight.